Pleasure this evening to welcome Jacob Schepis to the show. Really had difficulty, a few outtakes there trying to get that surname. How are you doing, my man?
I'm very well, thank you, David.
And thanks so much for giving up your time on what is an absolute hectic schedule looking from the outside in. So thanks for giving up time and chatting with me this evening. For people who are not familiar with you and your background, do you mind giving us a quick synopsis of basically what you do and what you're about?
Yeah, for sure. No, thank you for having me on. It's an honor. So I'm a coach. I have two facilities in Melbourne, Australia. JPS Health and Fitness is the company that I direct and coach at. I got into the game back in 2010, so 8 years now. I've been coaching, so like most trainers, I started at a commercial gym, cleaning treadmills, rinsing out the sauna, all the fun stuff, cold calling, all that kind of jazz. But soon I started to pick up a pretty decent client base and got to the point where I thought, hey, I'll have a crack at doing my own thing and opening a facility. So I did that when I was 22, a little bit naive, young and reckless, but I've somehow managed to make it work. Well, I think it's working. And yeah, so fast forward over the years, tried my hand at bodybuilding, powerlifting. I now work predominantly with bodybuilders and powerlifters, but also a lot of general pop clients and lifestyle clients, I prefer to call them. And yeah, so currently our facilities home 15 coaches. And we take around 500 sessions a week between the facilities. And, coaching is something that's very near and dear to my heart. I truly love it and love everything about the job itself, and only, wanting to. I really prioritize. So, yeah, that's a little bit about me, David.
100%, and you've quite a diverse background coming through there. You've been through the mill, quite a lot of in the trench experience, and we'll probably get stuck into that a little later on, where we talk about some of the realities and misconceptions within the industry. But I also must commend you on, you recently hosted the Ultimate Evidence-Based Conference down there. Absolute stellar lineup, and the feedback has been absolutely tremendous from what I've seen. So the first topic I want to get talking to you about this evening, Jacob, and you said you work with quite a diverse range of clients, and even within the powerlifters and bodybuilders, quite a diverse range in terms of where they are in their training age and how advanced they are in their career. And tonight I want to get into some coaching philosophies, and one of the big things we know when working with athletes, working with anyone, is their ability to buy into a system, to buy into a coach, and this is going to lead into their adherence. So for you, working with all these people, how do you go about developing trust from your clients and getting buy-in from clients? What do you think are the essential components of this?
Yeah, that's a brilliant question. I think this is where a lot of coaches go wrong, in that they think that buy-in is this universal, idea, or they've got one approach to obtaining buy-in with their clients. And I think, like you said, first, it's really important for coaches to understand what buy-in is, and that's just belief and support of an idea, concept, system, your coaching methodologies, you as a person. And as you mentioned, that really influences a client's willingness to follow the plan and trust the process, which is how we get them results. So in terms of getting buy-in, I think there's a lot of fundamental principles, like everything with training, nutrition. When it comes to buy-in, there's a number of principles that I try to adhere to myself when I'm working with a client. And, these are the assets that a coach has. So being able to demonstrate the requisite skills in a given area. So that is knowing how to get the client results and give them what they want. Also expertise. So within your given field or the niche that you're working with, or perhaps the client's specific goals, whether you have to generalize or specialize, that's a different story. But at the end of the day, you need to have that expertise. I think also buy-in is very much a function of our experience. So clients can see if you have the scores on the board, if you are producing consistent results with many, many folk who are in similar or the same situation. I think that goes a really long way in getting somebody to buy into your coaching systems and methods because they can see that it works. And that's really pivotal for building that foundation of trust and belief in what you're going to do with them. I also think that knowledge is critical. So the ability to conceptualize the frameworks around diet, training, psychology, and then integrate that information into practice. So not just being able to talk the talk, but actually being able to give people solutions, that make sense to them. I think that's really important. It's all well and good to be able to, recite the mechanisms of hypertrophy or discuss, the nuances of fat loss. But at the end of the day, people need to see that information being applicable to them because then they can buy in. They can actually see that, hey, this is something I can do. Furthering that, I think emotional intelligence is highly underrated when it comes to getting buy-in. You may have all the knowledge in the world, all the skills and the aforementioned attributes that I spoke of, but at the end of the day, if you cannot connect with that person on an emotional level, so, empathizing with their situation or being able to, communicate with them and having the interpersonal skills, whether it's nonverbal or verbal proximetrics to be able to understand who they are, what it is they want, why they want that, I think you're going to have a really hard time in what you're doing or to be able to influence change. And I think buy-in, stemming from that emotional connection is hugely important. And finally, I think, to get somebody to really believe in you as a coach, you need to lead by example. So, it's all well and good theoretically to have all of those things that I just discussed and to be ticking those boxes. But at the end of the day, if you aren't putting into practice what you're going to be doing with them, or you haven't done in the past to some degree, and that's not to say you need to be the strongest powerlifter in the world or, the leanest human walking, the Dublin streets. But at the end of the day, if you haven't lifted a barbell or you don't know what a 1 rep max feels like, but you're going to, be working with someone who wants to improve their 1 rep max, then they're not going to believe in what you're saying. And more importantly, as the process goes on, they might initially, but as the coaching process continues, they're only going to feel more and more disconnect. And I think that disconnect will eventually eradicate their belief in what you're doing with them. So yeah, when you're working with a very diverse array of clients, like I do, they're the principles that, I want to make sure that I'm upholding to get them to buy in. And obviously, it's going to be very context dependent. What's going to take precedence at that initial phase of the client's induction when they're starting coaching with me. For example, you might have somebody who's had a really bad with a coach in the past, and you might need to really demonstrate your knowledge and your experience and show them the higher road, from what they've experienced previously. Whereas you might have somebody who, has never been to the gym before. They don't know anything about, evidence-based practice. And they don't really care much for the information, the science, but you need to be able to connect with them on an emotional level. So I think if you have a conceptual understanding of, what qualities it takes to be able to get buy-in, and then you can that are going to be a priority or a focus point for the client, that's going to go a long way in being able to get them to support the ideas and the advice that you're going to be giving them.
100%, and I think that gives a really good overview there, Jacob. And I also must acknowledge that once again you have stereotyped me with the mean streets of Dublin, just coming out with buzzwords of Irish, but that is perfectly acceptable. One of the things there I want to pick up on, and you said about this knowledge and to be able to demonstrate knowledge to the client, and I think within the modern industry there is this trend of trainers have a hunger for knowledge and they want to know more, and as you said, get down into the mechanistic, the nitty gritty stuff, which is fantastic, and it's great to see trainers trying to expand their knowledge and their understanding. But with that, I think, do we elevate the risk of falling into a trap of maybe complexity and trying to show off to our clients and trying to prove to them how much we know and maybe over-educate them? Because is it too easy to forget that our clients don't want to be lectured to, or they're not signed up for a degree, but rather you're there to get them the results? So what probably the question I'm asking is, to what level of complexity should we bring to our clients? As in, how do we gauge to meet them at the level they're at? Because if they're an advanced athlete, yes, we may use more advanced system and tracking metrics and approaches. But if there are, as you say, a lifestyle client, we may not need to go into that level of kind of the tracking and that kind of thing. So how do you gauge, or do you have any thoughts around meeting the client at their level?
It's always good to view things on a spectrum because it can help us conceptualize two completely contrasting ideas. And in the case of complexity, we have on one end more information, more details, more nuances, getting into the weeds of things. And on the other end, we have simplicity, which is the actionable, tangible, day-to-day tasks that the client's going to perform. And obviously, the ease of understanding, increases as we move towards simplicity and decreases as we move towards complexity. And I think when we talk about complexity, the more complex something is, the more perceived effort there's going to be, for the client. So it's inversely related. And when we have more complexity, I think we need to first recognize that what is complex for someone is highly independent and determined by their level of knowledge and their ability to understand. So everybody comes to us as coaches from very different backgrounds, different, access to information, different education, and just a different ability to think. So I first always look to, what does a client know? What's their level of knowledge? Then I think, what is the client's goals? And from there, I can start to pick apart what level of complexity will benefit them in order to achieve that goal. So when working with a client, most coaches, as you know, David, we always want to give our knowledge. If we're reading about, the latest mechanistic data on muscle hypertrophy, we want to be sharing that with our clients, because not only does it reinforce what we know and what we're learning and help us in our education, but we do use it as a selling point, as a means of buy-in. But often, we give too much details that only muddies the water for the client, and they can't see clearly what it is they need to be doing. And like you said, at the end of the day, the clients are coming to us. Sure, education's a big part of the process, but at the end of the day, we're coaches, which means we need to provide a plan, actionable steps, and teach a client how to execute that plan. So I think we need to give enough details for sure, but only so much that the client can understand what it is they need to do to achieve their goals. For example, with a fat loss client, they'll be controlling calorie intake. Then we need to teach them, why they need to do it, right? And give them, enough information based on what it is they want to get out of the process. In the case of this example, that would be the physiology of fat loss requires an imbalance of energy. But then most importantly, we need to teach them how to actually do it. And that's the plan itself. So, teaching them how to track calories and macros and, meet their targets. So the level of detail they need within the program, within their diet, increases, depending on how interested they are in becoming educated. And not everyone wants to be a scientist. Not everyone wants to know as much as a coach. Some people just want to come in, train, tell them what to eat, have them, follow the plan and know what they're doing on a daily basis is moving them towards their goals. So, again, with this example, does the client need to hit their, calories and macros to the gram? Do they need to weigh in daily or weekly? How many numbers or metrics are we measuring? And again, this is all going to be driven by context. So I think good coaches will understand when the time comes to give more information, to get into the weeds, and to have those, higher level discussions with their clients where, they may not be talking about the pragmatic side of, training and diet, but more so the theoretical discussions. And this is great for the clients because they will get more than their money's worth, which I think is a brilliant thing. I think as coaches, we need to always be educating and make sure that our clients do understand, the right, quote unquote, right way to do things. But at the same time, we need to be able to discern how much detail or complexity is required to maximize buy-in. Like you said, it should only be enough so the client can buy in to, do what it is required of them to achieve their goals. And like we mentioned, it's all about the individual. So everyone's going to be different. If I'm working with a bodybuilder, some of my bodybuilders want to know less than my general population clients, right?
Yeah. But
some of them, they really love the science and the practice of bodybuilding, and they want to know, why do we have a refeed? What's leptin? Why does this, influence, hormonal markers? What's going to happen if I hit failure? They want to know all these things. Whereas some of my bodybuilders, they just want to know, what have I got to eat? What have I got to do in the gym? And I think to pick this apart, I always look to the client, and if they have no interest in the whys, I just move straight to actionable and practical advice. And if they've got lots of interest in the details and the whys, I can move up that spectrum towards the informative, explanatory, and more detailed discussions, and then move to the actionable. Mm-hmm. So I think having a little process like that goes a long way. It has for me. But yeah, it's all about the client. I think understanding that spectrum of simplicity and complexity, and knowing how to slide along that in any given scale to maximize buy-in is a really good way to go about coaching somebody. And just always understanding that context is, everything that we do as coaches. It's the foundation of our practice. So we always need to be looking to what the client needs, what they want, and what is going to benefit them in the long term in achieving their goals. And often clients may need more of that complexity, more information, for example, to dispel misconceptions or misbeliefs surrounding nutrition. And they may not be interested necessarily to hear that. But again, this is where you got to put your coach's hat on, make that hard call to give them what they need, not necessarily what they want, and go from there.
100%, Jacob, and I agree with you there. And as always, it does come back to the individual context and applying it to each individual client as they come. So there we were talking about between clients, assessing clients on an individual basis. But do we see a situation arise maybe within the same client where this varies from time to time, and not so much in the level of education we need, but maybe the level of complexity in terms of the tracking and the approach? And what I'm thinking now is you work a lot with physique athletes. So do you see that a lot of people try to optimize everything straight out, as in have their athletes track everything very rigorous? But when we're in something like a contest prep, should we be more aiming to make it as easy as we can at the start, because we know it's only going to get more difficult as we dig deeper towards the stage?
Yeah, that's a brilliant question. I definitely have done this in practice. Something I've been using for a number of years now is, some systems that increase the difficulty, I guess, or complexity of what we're doing with the client on a daily basis. So I do very much think that basics work at the start, keeping things as simple as possible to get the results. Because at the end of the day, people want to get results with minimal effort. And the easier we can make something for someone and still get them results, the better. We should only add in layers or details or complexities, when they're required to improve the outcome. If they're not required, you're getting results with minimal effort, then I don't see why we should make things harder than necessary. And to use the case of a bodybuilder, personally and with my clients, I will have them very loosely tracking their calories at the start of the contest prep. Protein and calorie target, that's it. And then as the process goes on and things get a little more difficult, rate of loss slows down, fat loss gets harder, we start to fine tune things. And that's when we start to turn up the light, and the brightness. Analogy I use is the dimmer switch. So we're always turning up and down, the light at which we see things, and measuring variables and how clearly we need to know what's going on in terms of intake, output, all those sorts of things. So I'll very much start with a pretty dull room, so to speak, just making sure that I can see and get from point A to point B. But as things get harder and harder, we need to turn that brightness up, and we need to move towards something that's a little more complex, monitoring all variables, and making sure that we're assessing everything in great detail, because that's what's required in the nitty-gritty of a contest prep when you're sub 10% body fat. But if I have somebody who's, say 15+% body fat, they can get a significant amount of progress out of, just tracking protein and calories. So I definitely see a case for, starting with simple and then moving up that spectrum as it's required. But there's a huge drawback if you start too far up that spectrum with too complex, because you're running out of room to move, and often without the talking about the theoretical drawbacks of starting close to your ceiling of complexity or what you can do with someone, people burn out. We're working with humans. If something's so arduous and just the effort is so high, for long durations, there's not a lot of people who are going to be able to sustain that. So I think, being adaptive with your approach, and being cognizant of the feedback and response that you're getting from the clients, to gauge whether or not you need to pull things back a little bit more and, transition towards what's practical, what's easy, and then moving up that scale towards, a little more rigorous, a process. But at the end of the day, you need to be watching the feedback from the client. I don't think there's a set way to go about things, whether it's diet or training with the client forever, whether it's dieting. Not all clients are going to track their calories and macros forever. That is a very unrealistic ideal to have as a coach. So when it comes to nutrition, for example, I've got a number of systems and processes where if I notice certain metrics like enjoyment of the diet, which is one that I monitor, starting to dwindle down when someone's tracking calories and macros, and I have 4 weeks or more where it's below a 3, irrespective of energy balance, we'll have a conversation surrounding, hey, what's going on? Why are you not enjoying the diet? And we might need to move to something just a little more simpler. Cool. I want you to create your own meal plan. Let's just follow that for the next month. Monday to Friday, track your calories on the weekend. And that way, we're still getting the same outcome. We're still working towards that same goal. But we're just making things a little simpler, a little easier for them to follow. And again, that might be great initially. But then over time, like anything, circumstances change, lifestyle changes. Their goals might change. They say, hey, I want to do a contest prep. It's like, oh, okay, cool. Now we go back to tracking your calories and macros. But I think, to answer the question specifically of, how do we move somebody through, various levels of complexity, and can more complexity at the start be a bad thing? I definitely agree. Like training, minimum effective dose sometimes, is going to be the best way to start.
Yeah, that's brilliant. I think it's really important lesson for people to take away, because I always like to explain it in the way that for the same investment, if we think of it from a business perspective, the aim is always to get maximum return on investment from the minimal initial investment. So if we're getting a return of $1,000, would we rather invest $500 or $10 to get that same return? So, and as we dig deeper and get closer to the limits of, say, contest prep, the initial investment is going to be higher to get the same return. So if we start high, there's nowhere to push further in. And I think a very important thing you said in the middle of that was we're working with humans, because it can be very easy as coaches to sometimes forget this, and when we're dealing with spreadsheets all day, we just plug in numbers and we can forget this. And you alluded to there was people burn out. We are dealing with actual humans, and I've heard you speak about this before, and I think it's great if you wouldn't mind maybe giving your own anecdotal experience with this, because I know years ago when you were trying to get into the AFL, you would have had, you could say, a passion but probably borderline obsessive orthorexic kind of approach, if we're being realistic, and you've obviously overcome that. So maybe if you wouldn't mind talking about your own anecdotal experience of this.
Yeah, for sure. So just to give the listeners a little bit of a background, back when I was 16 through to 19, 20, I wanted to try my hand at Australian rules football, and started adopting some pretty extreme approaches because I thought that was necessary, and I thought the harder things were, the more complex they were, the better the results I would get. So I was, running 3-kilometer time trials every morning, fasted, home for a protein shake, then straight to the gym. Then, it was just chicken and a bit of salad for lunch, followed by more running or football training in the evening, and obviously a match on the weekends. And I was consuming on average 1,800 to 2,000 calories a day as a 65 kilo male. Doesn't sound like too large a deficit, but you're performing the intensity and volumes of work that I was engaging in daily, and that I didn't have a day off. It's quite a problem, and I definitely fell into the trap of trying to make things harder and harder and harder, and more complex. And like David mentioned, there was a lot of signs of orthorexia nervosa. Binge eating started to become an issue, and the more complex things got, the more I lost sight of the big picture. The importance of everything else in life, relationships, jobs, responsibilities, commitments, friends, family, all these sorts of things. And it took a toll. And, I'm probably a little different to most. And I was in a very different circumstance back then. I was a young kid, so I could dedicate my entire life to this thing. Nothing else really mattered. Whereas now I have a family and a business, I wouldn't be able to adopt such an approach now, even if I wanted to. But at the end of the day, it's taught me a lot. And I think if you can understand the basic principles of nutrition and training, you can devise a program that is very, very simple and get results. You don't need to make things overly difficult or complex. As I'm saying, you don't work hard in the gym, or you don't have to be diligent with your nutrition, but the level of detail required to achieve, some pretty impressive body compositional changes isn't that much. And I think, hindsight's always 20/20. But at the end of the day, if I had my time again, I would likely, take that very minimalistic approach on the onset and only use the complexities of nutrition and training systems and methodologies when the time calls for it. And even then, given my goals, it didn't really it wasn't required. I think for the listeners, big take-home point is always prioritize the principles and have a good understanding of how what you're going to do will affect you, not just today, but in 6 months, 12 months, and 18 months. Because if you can't sustain what you're doing, you will burn out. And that's what happened to me. So, by 20, I had to quit football. I was looking for another, vehicle to, satisfy my obsessive compulsive tendencies, which is why I got into bodybuilding. But at the end of the day, I was burnt out. I, was binging. I didn't want to train. I was injured. All things that aren't going to help me achieve my goals long term. So investing too much too early, definitely to burnout. So invest just enough to see progress, and only add in more investment, if things start to slow down, your progress stalls. But even then, I would first question, is what I'm investing the right investment? Am I investing into the right things? I think that should be, a starting point before looking to invest more time, effort, and resources into training and diet. Because if we can get a better understanding of what we're doing and why it's not working, and hopefully, instead find a better way to do things without more effort, I think that's always a good idea. So, yeah, David, I hope that answered that question.
Yeah, 100%. And just before we finish up with, when you were down that obsessive rabbit hole, was there ever kind of a moment, an epiphany, when you came and said, this is not sustainable, this is damaging? Was there a specific moment you said, I need to turn this around, this is not sustainable for me?
Yeah, when my girlfriend at the time broke up with me because I was a social recluse, I didn't want to go out. I avoided social situations because it was exposing me to food. Didn't drink alcohol at my 21st birthday. I had a protein shake instead, and I was a bit of a laughing stock, between my friends and family at just the ridiculous, protocols and things that I was doing on a daily basis. And yeah, I looked to some other people who I guess had what I wanted, which was that, six-pack physique. And all of a sudden I started to see these guys who were eating carbs, who were having a social life, doing normal things. And I thought, well, that's not what I'm doing. So why? And, why aren't I able to, eat carbohydrates, at the time? Like that was my perception, right? Carbohydrates were the devil. Now I can't eat enough of them. And I look better. But yeah, I started to, that was the pivotal turning point where I started to look at what I was doing and question whether the juice was worth the squeeze, and whether having this physique that I had was worth the cost of everything else in my life. And upon some critical analysis, self-reflection, and just, growing up, I guess, the answer was no. So, I started to change what I was doing. And fortunately, I started to fall into the evidence-based community where, I went from that really low-road approach to, having a more balanced and long-term perspective of fitness.
And was it difficult for you coming out of that? Because I know you obviously found the right information, but a lot of time, if we've been in that kind of trap and rut for years on end, even though we know what we're doing is wrong, it can be sometimes difficult to overcome that. So when you got enlightened to this new way, you realised you could eat carbs, you didn't have to be a recluse. Did you struggle to still come out of it, even though you knew what you were doing was damaging for you?
Definitely. I struggled for many years. As I mentioned, I got into bodybuilding immediately after my short football career, and that was just another means to an end, really. It was just satisfying all of the underlying issues that were present. It was just a different, like I mentioned, different vehicle for doing so. But it wasn't until I came out of the contest prep where things really went sour. Binging. I regained like 25 kilos post-show in a couple of months, which led me to the point where I didn't want to coach anymore. I didn't want to do my daily activities. I was, quite depressed, and I actually took myself, booked a holiday to Thailand on my own, just for a month, because I had to just get away. I had to get away from everything that I was doing, my current environment, and just, reset the system and get to know myself a little bit better. So I did that. I know not everybody can do that, but I think sometimes taking yourself away from the environment that you're in that's causing you to be a certain way can be a really useful means of, getting that process of recovery or change, in the way that you're doing things. And then when you go back to that environment, hopefully you have, a better understanding and appreciation of what's going on and what you need to do moving forward. So that was definitely the case for me. So when I got back, I actually lost like 8 kilos when I was in Thailand, just because I stopped, eating a ridiculous amount of food. I felt better. I socialized. I was forced, out of my comfort zone in different ways. So I think when we're, falling into this trap of, becoming really obsessive with our fitness, it becomes a habit, and we very much, fall into routines, behaviors, and patterns that are just reinforced by the environment that we're in. So being away from that comfort zone that was Melbourne and my studio, I really had to change what I was doing on a daily basis. I had no option. I couldn't have my protein and oats for breakfast because there was only the food at the hotels. Excuse me, then. I couldn't cook my chicken because I didn't have a frying pan. I didn't have access to chicken. So I really, learned to get outside my comfort zone. I think that was a brilliant thing in allowing me to, move towards a more flexible, balanced, and, adaptive eating patterns. So yeah, I think that's that. Yeah, I hope that answered the question.
Yeah, it certainly did, and I really thank you for sharing that with us, Jake, because I know obviously that reminiscing over this is probably, even though you've a much better place now, it's never nice going back over that. But the only reason I kind of felt that it'd be very valuable because I feel there's a lot of people that can really relate to that, and I know our listeners will get great value from it. And there's plenty of people that I fear can sometimes use labels such as bikini competitor, as bodybuilders, you say, as a vehicle to justify an unhealthy relationship with themselves, with food, orthorexic nature. So I just hope that people can take some solace from that to know that it's not just them. There's plenty of other people that have been in similar situations and have overcome it and obviously got to a much better place, but it is something that is commonplace, unfortunately. So thanks very much for sharing that with us.
Not a problem, man. Yeah, I agree wholeheartedly. And, to the coaches out there, I think sharing your experiences is a great way to relate to people. I'm not afraid to share my shortcomings, my failures, the things that I didn't do well, or my struggles on a personal level. I think there's a perception amongst coaches that they need to be perfect, and that they need to be made of steel. But at the end of the day, we are people too. We learn, we make mistakes. We have setbacks, failures, and there's no point in our career where things are going perfectly, and there shouldn't be. There should always be something to learn. And I think experiences like this, whilst not ideal, and I don't recommend coaches put themselves through this deliberately, I think they can be very valuable in shaping your practice as a coach. And I think more importantly, they help you connect to other people, because as humans we connect to stories, to ideas, to experiences. So it's definitely helped me with, working with a number of people who are experiencing what I did to a lesser degree. There's so many people out there who, always want to do more. When they're not progressing, they want to do more work. Or they want to eliminate foods and food groups, or they want to do a bodybuilding show because they think that's the answer. And being able to share my experience has helped me in many situations with clients, get a better outcome. So, to the coaches out there who, may have had some treacherous experiences that they may not feel comfortable sharing, get comfortable with sharing them, because you'll get better results with your clients. And it's why people hire a coach. They want that human connection. They don't want a robot who, they idolize and just, admire because they're faultless. Whilst that might be the case initially, when time goes on, that's only inspiring or motivating for a very short period. Being able to connect with people, through similar or the same experiences, will last a long time.
Yeah, I 100% agree with Jacob. And again, thank you for sharing that. And I do echo your thoughts that as coaches, we do need to be more comfortable and open with discussing our experiences and our failures. And if we stay along that team, I think, as you said, you opened your facility at 22 years of age. This, for a lot of young coaches in the industry, this is probably the pipe dream: open and run their own facility. And I think on social media, it can be very easy to fall into trap, as you say, these people portraying the perfect life, the perfect thing. So from knowing people within the industry, I think there is a big gap between the vision of what it's like to run your own facility and the reality. So for you, what would you think, what were the biggest realities that hit you that maybe you didn't expect when you opened your own facility at such a young age?
Wow, where do I begin? So, yeah, David, opening a facility is tough yakka. It looks like it's all sunshine and rainbows from the outside. And I know that I definitely give that perception on the JPS page. Like, people would look at JPS and see us as being super successful, seamless, and just, prospering in the fitness industry. And whilst that's not necessarily untrue, there's a lot of things that get left out, on social media. I think social media is just a highlight reel, for what people want to show the world, and nobody wants to, no business owner wants to show people, their shortcomings, their failures, and the daily challenges that they face. But on my personal social media, I do try to keep it a little more real, and show people what it's like, and some of the challenges that I face, but I definitely don't do it enough. But opening a facility was one of the hardest things that I ever did, from financial stresses to, staff management. There's a lot more to it than what people think. You can't just coach anymore. And I think that was probably the biggest realization I had when I opened a facility, was that, hey, I love coaching, but now I have to do way more than just coach, which was not something that put me off or, forced me to rethink my decision in opening a facility, but it definitely wasn't what I expected, because I'm a coach. I love coaching, and I'm very fortunate now that I have a team. My brother, my business partner, he's fantastic with, the business management side of things. So he manages the business. People think that, I do all of that. I don't. He does all the back end work. I'm just, at the front end, teaching, coaching, doing all the fun stuff that I want to do. So I'm really lucky in the sense that, I had somebody who was able to pick up the slack where, I was, not as skilled or, experienced with. So I'm fortunate for that. And I now, have a team of admin staff, so I've got 2 assistants who help me out, with bookings and, payments and all those things. So I don't even have to worry about that stuff anymore. But initially when I did, it wasn't what I thought I was, getting myself into. I thought, I'll just have a spreadsheet, keep track of sessions. Well, it was way harder than that. So wearing many hats is probably the biggest realization I had when opening a facility. So if you're a coach, you want to have your own space and facility, I commend you, and I would support you in that decision, but you have to be fully aware of everything that comes with opening a gym. You're opening a business. You're not just coaching, which means, in essence, you have a hell of a lot more responsibilities. You have more pressure, more stress, and you have only, finite resources, especially if you are not financially equipped to hire a bunch of people to do everything for you. So, you have to have admin, you have to have your back end structured, your marketing, your management systems, all of those things before you even get to worry about, teaching somebody how to squat. So yeah, I guess it was a lot different to what I expected. I wouldn't say that I was completely unaware of what I was getting myself into, but I definitely didn't think it would be as hard as what it was initially. But as I said, I'm fortunate to have a pretty strong work ethic and a lot of really, really supportive people around me who have made me look good. And I think, if you look at any facility or gym owner, they usually have quite a significant number of people behind them helping them do things that don't get portrayed on social media. So, if you're looking to open a facility, just be mindful of that. But there was, I learned very early on a simple principle, which was P. So PEA, acronym for plan, execute, and assess. So that has been something that I've always done. So planning out, your course of action, if you're looking to open a facility, and really planning, not just, the good stuff, but the bad stuff, what are the things that could go wrong? What contingency plans do I have, if this doesn't work out. Not just the pipe dream and planning out, I want to have a gym, I want to have 500 sessions a week, I want to, then in 5 years time open a, second facility. And this is what I did initially, right? Like, I am a dreamer, which is why me and my brother make such a good team, because he's a realist. He's, highly, pragmatic and very pessimistic, whereas I'm just, optimistic to the point where it's dangerous. So he's like my range. So again, we're very different to most people, which is, I think, why we work. Because when I plan, it's, hey, let's do the ultimate evidence-based conference. We get 10 people down, we'll have 100 people there. And then after that, whereas he's like, Jacob, hold your horses. This is going to cost a lot of money. We're going to fly 10 people in from around the world. We've got to do this, this, this. What if we don't sell those tickets? And it's like, holy shit. So when I plan now, I'm very much aware of, hey, we need to plan not just for our successes, but our potential setbacks, obstacles, and failures. And then once you have that plan in place, you have to execute it and do everything that you can to make sure that you're, steering that ship towards, that pipe dream, but not to be so delusioned that you think you can get there without, some stormy seas. And then continually, looking out, not just ahead, but to the sides, behind, the ship, to see, hey, what's happening? Do we have a clear course, to the shore? Is there, storms to the left, sun to the right? What happened in the past? Why did that work? Why didn't it work? What can we do better? Always assessing. So yeah, the P principle, very useful in everything that I do. As a coach, as a facility owner, as a father, with my kids, I think it's, planning, executing, and assessing, very useful steps, for any endeavor.
Brilliant. And within that, obviously, you talked about the role of having a strong team and having people you can rely on and trust to take over what essentially are your weaknesses, stuff that you're not too strong on. Is that difficult in the early stages? Because I know when you start a business, I know it's something I struggle with. You want to do everything and control everything, and especially when it's your brand, your name, it can be very easy to want everything to be perfect. So was there a difficulty there in finding, firstly, identifying your own weaknesses, because it can be very easy to let our ego get in the way, and secondly, once those weaknesses were identified, to delegate those out to other people?
100%. Yes. So number one, I have quite a big ego. I think it's definitely been tamed over the years. Maturity will do that, and having two kids definitely, slows down the ego. You can't be as selfish and self-absorbed when you have two young girls. But definitely identifying my weaknesses was hard. It was only probably 3 or so years ago that, I really started to become aware that I suck at admin. I'm not good, with the back end stuff, with the finances, the management systems. But my brother was, and again, very, very unique situation, to have your brother, have the exact skill sets you don't. There's not a lot of people who are fortunate in that sense. So, the delegation of those things wasn't as much of an issue for me, because it's my brother, my business partner. It was just the perfect scenario, really. But with other areas that I'm not so good at, delegating has been difficult. Something I'm definitely still learning. I'm not there yet. Even our social media stuff. I get a little bit OCD. I want to be controlling and doing everything, because it's, my brand, my name, my reputation on the line every time I put something out. So I want to be in control of that. But there does come a point where that control will bottleneck your growth. And I think there's always a sticking point in a business, or, they're growing to the point where they need more, resources, more people to do things, but the business owner is not comfortable, in hiring new people to do what they're doing, and it's that awkward phase of growth that I think many coaches will experience, where their client list is full, they're busy, they've got emails coming out their butt, they've just kicking ass. And they probably need an assistant or someone to manage their finances, so they can focus on growing the business as opposed to working in the business. But it is a judgment call, and I think always evaluate decisions like that simply by weighing up the potential benefits with the potential costs. And if the benefits, not just short term but long term, will exceed that cost of hiring someone or delegating, then do it. And again, you do have to get comfortable with diluting control as you begin to delegate, and allow other people to help you build your business. But again, having systems in place to teach people what business is about, what you're doing, what they need to do, so that you are not relying on people but processes and systems, is very useful. Early on, I used to rely on people. I wanted to get good coaches in, that were already established, and have them, work alongside me, and help me train my clients. But relying on people was a huge mistake, because people can come and go. We both know this. But moving forward, having learned from that, now I'm privy to having multiple systems to teach people, the JPS mission, what we do, how we do it, so that we're relying on that to teach people, more so than relying on the person themselves. So I think delegation is tough, but when you get the right person with good systems, that's when the magic happens. So finding good people to implement your systems and your processes and your methodologies is key. But delegation's hard, but you do have to accept that it should free you up to do bigger and better things. And if the same or a very close result is occurring when you delegate, then you have to be okay with that. You can't expect it to be perfect. You really do have to adjust your expectations and what's realistic for somebody else who isn't you, and who doesn't have the passion or the drive or just the knowledge and skill set that you have. You have to appreciate that, and accept that, hey, when they do, what it is I was doing previously, maybe it's not going to be as good, but if we can get it within, this ballpark here, that's okay. If they fall below the benchmark, that's a problem. But if you can set some benchmarks, some KPIs, and they can, work within the confines of, a little bit below what you would typically do, and that allows you to do more and, work on building the business, then delegate.
And I think this hesitancy to delegate stems a lot from this, as you said, this passion and this desire to have everything perfect and, really everything down to a T, because it is our brand. And the other area I see that affecting, and I know the JPS brand, you guys put out an awful lot of content, and that content is of high quality across social media. Do you find sometimes that this desire for perfectionism is something that we can also be damaging to this? Because I know myself, I've had dozens of articles where I'll have just scrapped them and not released them. Same with infographics, same this. So do you sometimes struggle with finding that correct balance between something being absolutely perfect and something being acceptable and useful to put out there?
Yeah, so I struggle with that quite a lot initially, because I am a perfectionist by nature. So I only want to put out the highest quality work. I've got, like you would, David, I would say close to 30 or 40 articles that have never seen the day of light, infographics that I just haven't published, videos that I've recorded, things like that. But what's been useful to me over the years is following the 80-20 rule, so the Pareto efficient, because the Pareto principle, because if I can do something at 80% or a little bit more of my ability and what is quote unquote perfect, that's going to be better than most, number one. And number two, it's still going to get the message across. And I think as coaches, we need to accept that our job as coaches and that social media is all about spreading a message. Articles, educating people. It's all about, teaching, and there's nothing perfect about teaching. So if I do something at 80% and I'm satisfied that it's good enough, I pull the trigger. I've stopped chasing that, perfection with what I do now. I need to do 80%. Once I get it there, it's good enough, get it out, because it's better than nothing. And the time investment for that 80% is not proportionate to its percentage. So it won't take me 80% of that 100% time. Getting to 80% will take me less than half the time it will take me to get something perfect. And an example of this is, I could write an article. I have done, just recently for our blog that took me 20 minutes. But an article I wrote for Alan Aragon in his research review, and mind you, this article was referenced. This article was, 2,500 words. When I write something, I have a very hard time holding back the details, right? And I wrote an article for Alan Aragon last year, and that took me 2 months.
Yeah.
Right? So I wanted that to be perfect, and I accepted, hey, this has to be perfect for this, specific, job. But when it comes to everything else, social media wise, 80%. And I apply that to a lot of the things I do, and knowing when things require 100% of my effort, attention, and abilities, then I'll make that decision before starting it, and vice versa. So yeah, that's been how I do it, man.
It's great, and I only ask because I think that's something that can resonate and a lot of people can relate to. And I know you're stressed for time, so we'll start to wrap it up. But the last thing I want to talk about is something you've touched on several times, and that's something that seems very important, integral to your business model, and that's this concept of systems. So I know from people looking from the outside in, it seems like you are an absolute machine, Jacob. You have the 2 facilities, you have a young family, and then on top of that, you do a ton of, obviously, the mentorship, seminars, but also a lot of online coaching. So to balance all this, I've heard you speak before about the importance of these systems and templates. So maybe if you'd like to go into the details and maybe some practical steps that may help other coaches out there that want to emulate what you do.
Yeah, for sure. I'll start by saying that any system should be built on principles. So I'm sure a lot of the listeners would have picked up through this episode that, I talk about principles, I talk about systems. The principles underlie the systems. So systems are just a way of executing certain principles. It's a method. So in terms of the systems we have at JPS, they're all based on fundamental principles, and it starts with, the screening process. So, we have templates and a system that we use for our consultations, assessing somebody's confidence in the gym, their locus of control, their abilities, questionnaires that, have all the basics, the general part Q, but also assessing their level of knowledge, prior dieting and training history, goals, lifestyle, all of those things. So it starts with the consultation, and then we move to, programming for their training. And we have templates for their training. We have a base template, which is for beginners. So very simple. Exercise, reps, sets, write down their weight. That's it. Very, very basic. Then we have our intermediate template where they're tracking RPE. They'll be more closely monitoring fatigue. We'll have, metrics in place where we look at volume, weekly volume, and intensity. And then we have our advanced template, which is literally like our mother template, where we're looking at everything within their training, from sleep, recovery, all of the details. We have the same for dieting. So we have beginner templates where it's basically, very simple introduction to what is protein, what are carbs, what are fats, create a day's worth of food. We'll adjust it with the clients, and that's about it. We just start bringing awareness to different, foods, and creating a diet that they can adhere to and that fits their lifestyle, their preferences. Our intermediate template, that's where we start to, turn the dial up a little bit, and we get them tracking calories, tracking protein. It's optional carbs and fats there, but for the most part, we just start tracking a little more closely their intake, calories and macros, and we'll start teaching them the importance of fiber, meal timing, around training, optimizing a few things, and they'll be measuring their body weights and taking assessments more regularly here. And then we have our advanced tracking templates, which is where our clients are, typically only going to use this if they're in a contest prep for physique, or they're a powerlifter, or an advanced athlete who, again, loves the details and loves the complexity. That's where we're literally looking at all the variables, sleep, hydration, meal timing, all of that stuff. So yeah, those templates for us allow us to streamline our clients, and also gives them something to progress to as well. So they're not always following the same, template. It's like a little kid who gets a new toy. It's like, oh my God, it's this shiny new thing. And it keeps it exciting for them. But apart from that, we have, templates for pro forma emails. So if a new client inquires about something, obviously we individualize all this. So I just want to, highlight that we don't just give everyone the same shit. And they're just templates, and we individualize it. But what the templates allow us to do is spare up time. We don't have to create a new program, a new template, for each client. We have a number of different templates. For example, we have, a 7-day. So we've got templates for literally everything, and then the individualization comes in choosing the right template for the right person, and then tweaking it based on what it is they require, as opposed to just handing out the same thing to everyone. But this allows us to have more time to program right, to actually write the program, as opposed to having to do all these sorts of things, to educate and upskill our coaches, because they're not spending a lot of time doing these sorts of things. To update and check in with their clients, so getting personal things, because again, just more time's available, and also to market the business and all that jazz. So the systems that we have are simply there to allow for a more streamlined and efficient process. And I think this is really important for coaches, because the more able you are to streamline things, the smoother the transition is for your client. And at the end of the day, we want to take our clients from 0 results to getting results. And if you can have a way that structures that in a logical manner, that can be individualized, a long way. And some of the systems that I have go into a little more detail into program design. For example, I have a lighting system with my clients. Green, that means the weight was easy, for the number of reps and sets that they can progress to more weight or more reps. Orange is it was pretty challenging. They could probably only add a set, as opposed to reps or load. And then red is, hey, that was too hard. I probably need to repeat that weight again, or reduce the weight the following week. Another system that I have in my program design is I have priority 1, 2, and 3 exercises. So this is very much auto-regulation here, guys. And what I do with the P1, the P2, P3, that's just a priority system. Priority 1, priority 2, priority 3. So with my clients, I will have their squats, for example, their bench and their deadlifts. That's a priority 1 movement. You've got to get this volume in for the week. Priority 2, it's like, hey, this is really important. I need you to get this, in most circumstances, unless something drastic changes in your schedule. And then the P3 are, hey, if you've got time, you can make this work, do it. If you don't get it done, you can move it to another day when you have more time. And this has been really useful in, managing clients who have time constraints. So it's a great little system that I've used over the years. And another system I have, on the diet front is what I call the 5-2 system. Not the 5-2 diet, but basically it's just 5 for fat loss clients. I set them up. We'll have 5 lower calorie days during the week, so we're at a deficit for the most part of the week. They'll have 2 days at maintenance over the weekend. Most people aligns with their lifestyle, because they're just more able to adhere to more calories on the weekend, where they have social events and things like that. But then the 5-2 extends beyond just the weekly setup.
So I want them to have 5 serves of protein a day, 2 serves of carbs, 2 serves of fat. They've got to train with weights 2 to 5 times a week. So just playing on the numbers and having a bit of fun with it like that. And again, it furthers to the meso cycle. So we'll have a 5-week pretty aggressive dieting phase, but then we'll have a 2-week reverse diet. And this is really important because we get the buy-in with that first 5 weeks when their weight's coming down and things are progressing just nicely. They buy into, hey, this guy is getting me results. And then those final 2 weeks, when you reverse diet, most people are hesitant to increase their calorie intake when they want to lose fat, right? Yeah. But you've got the buy-in from the first 5 weeks, so that when you increase their calorie intake, they're going to listen to you. And this is really important because people need to learn how to eat a varied, intake, and to eat more food when the time calls for it. So having that system has not only allowed me to get results, in a fat loss sense, but also teach people how to adjust their calorie intake, eat at maintenance, up regulate, down regulate calories based on different phases. And I forgot to mention within that 5 low day, 2 high days, the 5 low days, they'll follow a meal plan that they create for themselves, and the 2 high days they'll be tracking calories using a tracking app or things like that. So we're teaching skills as well. So having systems like that, inbuild all those principles that we want to implement as coaches. So just adherence, energy balance, enjoyment of preference, protein intake, the importance of resistance training. They're the big rocks. There's nothing magic about this stuff. It's just my little spin on how to, do it in a way that's easy, simple to understand, and ticks the boxes, that's in line with, the JPS mission and philosophy.
That's perfect. And I really enjoy those because I think there's little gems there that people can take away. And again, it just shows the importance of understanding the context and individuality, even with the priority system 1, 2, 3. I know that's probably for powerlifters the biggest issue to face is the time constraint to get in the appropriate volume. So systems like that can be very appropriate. So before I ask you the final question, Jacob, if people are looking to follow you, get in contact, what is the best place to find you?
They can get in contact on social media. So Jacob Schepis _JPS on IG. JPS Health and Fitness is the company. That's where you'll find all my content. I only put up my own personal musings on my social media. So just searching JPS Health and Fitness on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, and obviously our website. We have a lot of content going up there.
Fantastic. And that brings us to our final question, Jacob, and the one that everyone gets asked, and we may have touched on it already, and this doesn't have to be related to business. You can take whatever spin you want on it at all, and that is, what would you say is the biggest mistake you've made or the biggest learning experience you've had that's changed the way you approach either your mindset or your career as a whole?
Well, the biggest mistake I've made, there's too many to count, David. The biggest mistake I made, honestly, was ignoring my mistakes when I was younger. I would make a mistake and I would just put the rose-colored glasses on and focus on, moving forward. And that was a mistake because I had to, reflect and assess, like I mentioned earlier, what it is, I did wrong and why, it didn't work, why things, turned out to be unfavorable. So I guess the biggest mistake I've made has been, not appreciating the fact that I do make mistakes and ignoring them.
That's a fantastic answer, and again, one that I think people can resonate with and hopefully take some value from. So it has been a pleasure chatting with you this evening, Jacob. I know I've taken a lot from this conversation, and I know the listeners will too, and I know it is only the start of your day on the other side of the globe. So thank you so much for giving up your time, and I thank you again for coming on and sharing quite a wealth of business, professional, and also personal information. So, Jacob, thank you very much.
Not a problem, David. Thank you for having me.
There you have it, episode 72 with Jacob Schepis. Now, I think we can all agree that that was an outstanding conversation, and there is a lot we can take away from that. And personally, I really like and value how open Jacob is about his past, about some of the darker aspects in his past and his failures, and how he's learnt and moved on from his mistakes. Because within this industry, we often see this fake persona across social media of everyone with the perfect life and constantly happy, and these positive vibes that we see put out constantly. But the reality is it's never really like that. And I think as educators and as people, we can learn a lot from looking outside our own field. So personally, what I've been looking at, or one of the areas I've been interested in lately, is looking at therapeutic methods for, say, mental health disorder and these kind of things. And one of the areas that's quite fascinating is the use of cognitive behavioral therapy. So the very basic premise of that is being fully acknowledged, or being fully acknowledging that in life as humans, pain, despair, loneliness, rejection, all these feelings and emotions are inevitable. They are something that as humans we will all face at one time of our lives. But what we can control, because all these things, pain, suffering, that is uncontrollable. We can't control it. It is going to happen at some stage. But what we can control is our attitudes and reaction to these situations when they occur. And can we control, do we have a positive and proactive mindset to react and deal with these situations, pain and suffering, when they happen? So I think that's a very interesting concept, that these negative aspects are going to happen in our lives. We can't control it, it's inevitable, but what we can control is our attitude and how we approach and overcome and grow from these situations. So I hope there's a bit of value in that maybe you can take and get some ideas circling in your head. So that was a fantastic episode with Jacob. I hope you took a lot from it. Again, I will say we are shitty salesmen here, but we are very good coaches and we offer very valuable service. So if you're interested in working with me personally or one of the other coaches to help you achieve your results, either with yourself, or you're a coach or personal trainer yourself that wants coaching, or would just like a one-to-one consult to discuss maybe some strategies you can use with your teams or your clients, I am more than happy to provide that service to you. So you can reach out through the website or through my email, david@synapseperformance.ie, even if you just want to open up a line of communication for a chat. And other than that, till next week, guys, have a good one.